Welcome to MyLife, Chassidus Applied, episode 302. We've just entered the month of Nissan. The Gemara says Nissan has two nunim, has a nun, a double nun. So Nissan, Nissim, Nasibeh. Miracles and miracles and miracles happen in this month. Not just in quantity, but also in quality. It's also the month of Geula, Chedesh HaGeula is Nissan. The Medrash says, "B'Nissan nigalu, b'Nissan asidin ligal." In Nissan we were redeemed 3,332 years ago from Mitzrayim, and b'Nissan nigalu we will be redeemed. So it's a month, perhaps more like no other month, all about redemption, about miracles, and of course in it we have the special days, Beis Nissan. We spoke about this year's 100 years from the Rebbe Rashab's Histalkus. 1920, 2020, Tofresh Pei, Tofshin Pei, 100 years from the Frierdiker Rebbe assuming the leadership, the 6th Chabad Rebbe from the 5th Chabad Rebbe, 70 years from the Rebbe's leadership. We're going to be coming to Yud Aleph Nissan soon, the Rebbe's birthday. Yud Gimel Nissan is the Tzemach Tzaddik's Yortzeit and Histalkus. And of course Pesach itself. So it's a month that's so rich with everything about living a life that's beyond natural. It's the supernatural, the miraculous, the redemptive. And yet here we are, steeped in a historical, unprecedented event that is affecting literally 8 billion people on this planet. Every sector of society. It's upended, disrupted, destabilized. Nobody has any idea where we're going. Control, where we thought just a few short weeks ago we were in control. Everyone knows we're not in control. The paradox is so glaring. And yet, we as a Jewish people in general, Chassidim specifically, Chassidei Chabad particularly, we were trained for a moment like this, for moments like this. Not that we want it, not that we asked for it, not that we accept it, but it's a reality where God wants us to be right now. In the language of the Pasuk, that is the night of Pesach. How uncanny is that? V'atem loiseitzu ish mepesach beisei ad beiker. And you should not leave this house, you, your family, in this house until the morning. And actually that's the posuk upon which is based the halachas that deal with magefa, that deal with an epidemic and a pandemic, which we'll talk about shortly. So the paradox we have seen many times. And what's so powerful about us as the Jewish people, what's powerful is that not only have we endured and survived, we have thrived. Kashayano Esam, yet another Pesach-related verse. Kashayano Esam, as they were oppressed in Mitzrayim in Egypt. Ken Yirbe v'chen Yifritz. In direct proportion, they thrived, they flourished. Yirbe and Yifritz, not just one language. I've been reading articles how a cataclysmic event, we have to look back at the ancient Hebrews, one secular writer writes, how their cataclysm turned them into a great nation. One tremendous creative moment. A new stage in enlightenment, a new stage in history, referring to the Jewish people coming out of Mitzrayim. So we don't compare challenges and cataclysms, but this clearly is a disruptive one in a serious way. Maybe not quite like a world war, but still it's taken lives. And there are people right now in danger. And as such, let me just say, I want to dedicate this program and all our programs and all our special programs that we've been creating, empowering resources for this time, for a total refuah, shleimah, total healing and recovery, completely, as if it never happened, to all those that are in need of that. And families should have the strength to get through this. God should protect us all, whoever we may be, wherever we may be, and whoever you may be. And we should come out stronger, thrive and flourish. Because at the end of the day, we don't control events around us, but we control our attitude. And we control what we can do. And we can rise to the occasion. We can see ourselves as serving the moment. We could see ourselves increasing in love, demonstrating courage. Because events like this bring out, unfortunately, sometimes the worst, but the best in people. And we were trained. When I say we, I speak especially for the Jewish people, and especially Chassidim. We were trained. This is what we're here, not to cower in fear, not to retreat. We need to be prudent and practical, but to rise to the occasion and demonstrate that when the entire world around us has been disrupted, we have inner resources. The neshama shines stronger than ever. Socially distant, but soulfully close, closer than ever. Soulfully united. The Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, chapter 32, that the body's love, all of love is based on one principle, transcendence. Our bodies are separate. Gufim michalokis. Different places, different locations. Even when we were congregating, we're still separate entities. Now we're told to be separate, actually separate because of the virus and its contagious nature. Want to contain it. So we're quarantined, sequestered, whatever the word is. But neshama-wise souls, closer than ever. Look how many Zoom conferences, classes, online programs, inspirations are emerging from this. People feel when something is lacking, you start feeling. Someone told me the other day, he's desperate just to say hello to the elevator man in his office building. Suddenly realize the things that we just took for granted. So this is an opportunity to create a revolution in achdus, in unity. As much as we're being separated physically and socially, we have to, in direct proportion, double, triple our unity spiritually. One person, one heart, one soul. And there's so many ways to do it. This is what we were trained to do. And I specifically speak as Chassidus applied. Though there are many questions that I still have backed up, really challenging issues, but I just feel that at a time like this, we're all in this together, and basically taking the cue from the Rebbe, quoting the Rambam, that based sort of when there's a catastrophe that strikes a community, and here it's a community, it's the entire world, and every sector of it, it would be callous, achzodius, to disregard it and say, mikra nikra just happened, let's move on. Even in the name of faith. Faith doesn't mean we ignore it. Faith means we stand strong. The same Abishter that says have faith says, now I want you to be sequestered in your home. So here's where we are. So we'll be dedicating this program to more questions that have come in. Many keep coming in. I mean, I feel honored in one way. I feel blessed, even though I would prefer otherwise, that people are turning to us. This is the time where I feel myself, the Meaningful Life Center, our organization, Chassidus Applied, everything, all our resources, to focus them, to help us all build strength and courage, inner resources, because that's what we have. That's what we have to turn to. There's nothing out there that's going to keep you secure. Out there, I mean in the material world. Health-wise, we have to be careful. The economy is in a very fragile place. Travel, all our plans, all human plans. Right now, we are absolutely vulnerable. God leads the footsteps of man. Everybody recognizes that now. I was reading another article, someone writes, the prosperity of the Western world, the success of the general modern world, has created, on one hand, so much success, but God has become irrelevant. There's no need for some transcendent force, except, of course, the Spirit always needs it, but it was easy to ignore it, to be distracted. We were seduced by our successes and our illusion of control. And now, many, and I hear from people on an ongoing basis, people who have been not built up and fortified their inner resources are finding it especially challenging. Because what do you turn to? You can't escape to your work, to your job. Your job may even be in jeopardy if not been laid off already. Your investments, our plans, our restaurants, sports. Do you know how many people are dependent for the baseball season coming? Theater, entertainment, as I said, travel plans, you name it. All those things we had planned, our calendars, have all stopped. Everything stopped indefinitely. So with inner resources, you turn to another dimension of strength. If God forbid you don't have them, now's the time to build them. And the good news is that it's there, waiting for you. Your soul is alive and kicking. I just started this past week as one of the programs we started, I think, called Your Daily Spiritual Antidote. It's a 3-minute video every day. Exactly that. bolstering and boosting your psychological and emotional immunity through empowering your soul, recognition of your soul, and accessing its resources, its strengths, its tools to help us in this time. The truth is we always need it. But this material world has a way of hypnotizing us, of seducing us, of making us feel everything is fine. But it's not, because it's a fragile world. And now we recognize it. So we'll focus on many questions that came in, but I want to put a few things into context because a few of you asked. Of course, we're coming, this week is, we can't ignore the week, as I said, we're going into the deeper part of Nissan, which means leading up to Pesach. There'll be one more program before that, the Aleph Nissan special next Sunday. But this Shabbos is going to be Shabbos HaGodel and Parshat Tzav. We're also coming from last Thursday was Beis Nissan. Last Friday, was Beis Nissan, 100 years of the Rebbe Rashab's Histalkus and the Frierdiker Rebbe's leadership. I spoke about it, but I want to touch upon it as well. And of course, Pesach itself. So there's much to say. It's everything is divine providence. There are many lessons we can learn from this period in time, and especially for Chassidic Chabad, it's you have to say it's quite I don't know what the word for it, it's quite bizarre that it's such a special year. I just mentioned 100 years from the Rebbe, the fifth Chabad, the Rebbe's Histalkus. 100 years from the Frierdiker Rebbe's assuming leadership. 80 years from when the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America. 70 years when the Rebbe assumed leadership. All these milestones. In this year, Tovshin Pei, 2020, we have this unprecedented event. And I think that's a good place to begin. Unprecedented. Well, there are events in life that have affected large segments of people, continents even. Wars, God forbid. Remember 9/11. And in many ways have changed things. But here, there's no person on earth that this is not affecting. Even little children who are not aware of it. There's no sector in society that's not impacting. And not just impacting, as I said, it's stopping some things cold. Now, of course, we'd all love this goes away, back to square one, where we restarted a month ago. I don't believe that's going to be the case. It all comes down, of course, what we learn from it. We definitely don't want the epidemic to stop, and stop the sickness, and stop the illnesses, and let everybody be well and healthy. But the whole disruption, suddenly a society that was like the train was going at 1,000 miles an hour, the merry-go-round, the roller coaster, everybody, it's all come, say, to a grounding stop, to a grounding halt, but quite paralyzed in many ways. So you have to say, if an entire world is hearing about this and affecting them, it has to mean a message. There's a message here. Besides the message that we should be more careful and we should have anticipated viruses and pandemics and so on, there's a message. This is the foundation of all of Judaism, foundation of all of Chassidus. As I said, the Rambam. There's a message, there's a lesson. Now, no one is bold enough and no one has the arrogance to say, I know, I'm a prophet, I know exactly what God is planning here. But one message we know for sure is that we have to make even more noise on a positive that drowns out and is more powerful than the negative. So what do we see? We see a certain distancing. We have this quarantine. The immediate answers, as I mentioned, now we have to create more achdus, more unity, more love. We're told that this is the seventh generation. Moshiach is we're at the threshold. Now, I am not going to say that a negative event is a sign of Moshiach. Even if you find some obscure medrash, that's not how we think. It's not the event that happened, it's what we do about it. If this turns into a wake-up call, and it should, and I find it unfathomable, I would find it absolutely unacceptable if we do not use this moment where the world is receptive. People they want to learn, they want to introspection, they want soulful things, to use it as an opportunity to create a global spiritual revolution, higher consciousness. Literally give it on a platter. If you had gone to people a month ago, 2 months ago, and say, let's sit down and focus on our priorities. What's the most important thing in life? Is it the body or the soul? Is it survival or transcendence? Most people would say, come back to me after the summer, come back to me after next year. We're busy. I got to go to my job. Suddenly we don't have that answer. We have time. And we can't just run. We can't say I'm going out to dinner or I'm going to a show or I have a game to attend. So we have now essentially the attention of millions and billions of souls. How will we do? Those of us and all of us. Because each of us in our own little way has what to give and contribute, to teach. This is the time, perhaps never in history will we ever have such an opportunity. Again, we didn't ask for it and we now want it, but it's here, to turn this into a true global revolution of acts of goodness and kindness. In mass, we're talking about a critical mass, billions. What will it do for the morale of people? People know, here's a project I can be involved in, here's a volunteer, here's a social service, here's how I can serve, how I can help. Men, women, children. What will it do for our psyches? For our emotional and spiritual health when we take such a proactive approach? It still doesn't take away, we know there's a pandemic and we have to do everything from a health perspective. But what would this do? Lately there's a lot of talk about how gratitude is good for your health. Yes, giving is also good for your health. Especially in a challenging time, the greatest empowering thing is not to feel demoralized and broken and resigned. Look, what's happening? But it's to be proactive and in some way make a difference. These are the choices we have now. And we have to encourage each other. Because at the end of the day, we all have our weak moments. We need to encourage each other. It needs to be a synergy, a grassroots revolution greater than anything. So when the story will be written about 2020, it won't be just that there was a pandemic called coronavirus, COVID-19. The story will also be that a human race rose to the occasion and created a groundswell of goodness and kindness and love and unity and sensitivity and refinement never seen before in all of history. That should be the headline. Two headlines: coronavirus and the human response. This is what Torah Chassidus demands of us. No question in my mind. And I'm not saying it just as lines. I've been doing exactly that, not tooting my horn here, just to share with you, trying to create programs. But you know, we all need to do it together. We need it to turn into literally a global movement, a ripple effect that, yes, affects the critical mass, a tipping point where everybody is involved, and everybody in their own way. We're not dictating. No one's telling anyone how to do it, what to do. So, my friends, if you want to be part of this, you should be. Let's partner. Send me any suggestions. Let's find a place, create a forum where we can put our heads together. It could be small projects, big project, community, small community at home with your children involved, creative ideas, but all toward what? To making the human race live up to its highest possible standard. That's what this time is about. A few months ago, we also wanted it, but it was very hard because everybody was busy. Busy. Those security blankets and comfort zones are right now not there. So now's the time. We're naked, we're vulnerable. What makes us humans, our souls, is now exposed. So let's do what we have to do. That's the overall message. And essentially it's the message of Pesach. Since Pesach is coming, one of the questions someone asked is, what lessons do we learn from Pesach about the coronavirus? Well, the first lesson is that. What did the Jewish people do with their disaster and their catastrophe? They became greater people. They thrived. They committed to the highest standards of the human race. The moral foundations of civilization grew out of the hell of Egypt. 49 days later, they ended up by Har Sinai, Mount Sinai. Taking the Jews out of Egypt in order to serve God, to receive the divine mandate, what it means to be the best possible human being. the blueprint of the Torah, bringing civilization to the world. That was what grew out of it. That's what has to happen now, in our own way. So Pesach, that's the first lesson. The second lesson, all the laws about Mageifa, about epidemics, are derived from that verse in Parshas Boy, chapter 12, I believe Pasuk 22. After Moshe tells them what Hashem told him, HaChedesh Hazel Lachem, we read it 2 weeks ago, that this is the month of redemption, renewal. And you will, on the 15th day of this month, you will leave this God-forsaken place called Mitzrayim, which of course we know is not just a physical redemption, it's a spiritual one. The Maral of Prague says that after that, the Jews assumed a personality of freedom, of emancipation, of individuality, that no longer will they ever be a servant to a servant. You're my servant, you're God's servant, you're not a servant to a servant. No longer will they worship human beings and man-made devices and institutions. As Mordechai demonstrated in the story of Purim, he would not bow. On the 15th of the month, but the night of the 15th, you shall bring a paschal lamb, a korban Pesach. And you should know that outside there will be an epidemic, a pandemic. And in bayis b'lo mes, that night, there was no home without a death among the Egyptians, because this was the last of the 10 plagues of the firstborn, Makas B'cheres, which finally broke their back. The Egyptians were like Nazis, refused to let the Jewish people go, even though they tortured them, killed them, enslaved them for 210 years. The Gullus, the depth of the Gullus was less than that. It's Pevav, whatever, the story with the Miriam, 86 years, or whatever that number is. But it was a long time. So finally, Makas B'cheres. So Va'atem, says Moshe Rabbeinu. Va'atem, lo yiseitzu, ish mepesach beisei ad boker. And you shall not leave this home. Pesach beisei, from the door of your home, until the morning. Because there's an epidemic out there, as Rashi explains. And it's indiscriminate. You cannot go out there. God will protect you as long as you're here. But the Jews didn't cower in fear. They celebrated Pesach. They knew the next day, Baker, after the morning, they're marching out of this place. The Geula, Geulas Mitzrayim, Yitzias Mitzrayim, an event that we remember every day, and we commemorate and recreate for thousands of years, till today. Not just on Pesach, throughout the year. So the Gemara in Baba Kama, Samach Da Samach Hamid Beis. Is it Samach Hamid Beis or Samach Hamid Aleph? Samach Hamid Beis. Yeah. 60b talks about and learns from this posuk what we're supposed to do in a time of a devet, of a plague, an epidemic. That you have to sequester yourself in your home. The Ramah explains from the Mariel, in Yeridea, we talked about it last week, one Yeridea, Kufta Zayin, that at the beginning, if you can, leave the city. But if you can't, you have to quarantine yourself. And the Gemara brings 3 psukim. This pasuk in Pasha Boy, then another pasuk from Mishlei that talks about that you should remain in the home till over Hazam, till the plague ends. And the Gemara says, what do you need the second pasuk? It says to tell us not just by night, also by day, because from the pasuk in Boy you could say by night. And then comes a third pasuk from Dvarim, Sefer Dvarim, that says, because you could think, as long as there's fear, charoda, and trembling at home, that you're afraid. But let's say you don't feel that way. So maybe you can go outside to connect with other people. So it says no. Even if that's the case, outside is not the place to go, because there it's the worst. In the home, there may be also, you know what's happening, so there's some fear, as Rashi explains. And from there we derive this halacha of how we're supposed to behave. Mamish, what we're being told right now. So it's not just we're talking about an epidemic from heaven. I mean, everything is from heaven. But even a virus like this, because it has also the contagious elements. The Alter Rebbe, in Hilchas Shmiras Guf V'Nefesh and Bal Tashchis, Sif And is this? Remember, we don't have all the Alter Rebbe Shulchan, but we do have this part. And he brings the Gemara and brings in Sif Yud Gimel, and he says exactly this. And I'll just read the relevant lines. V'yesh livroyach b'tchilas hadever. The beginning of a plague, you have to run away from the city. V'im loy borach b'tchilas, and if you didn't run, that's from the Maril and the Ramah. If you didn't run away in the beginning, lo yivrach b'seifa, you shouldn't run away at the end. Elo yachbi atzmei b'mistorim. You should hide yourself in b'mistorim, in concealed way. You should quarantine yourself, basically. V'lo yisra b'shuk, you shouldn't be seen in the street. Mipnei hamazikim, because of the destructive forces. K'moshe kosov, v'atam leiseitzu ish mepesach beisei ad beker. Alter Rebbe. I'm not here to talk the halacha, to see how Pesach teaches us about the plague and how you're supposed to sequester yourself, to quarantine yourself, but not because we're afraid, because that's what the Eibishter wants. And right now it's a time of retribution. In the homes, celebrate. Strengthen your relationship with your spouse, with your children, with your siblings. Find ways to connect to others the way the doctors and the rabbis are telling us to do, not begashmis. Reach out, technology, and so on. So interestingly, in the notes on the side, in the gloss, brings a Zohar. Of all parshas, which parsha? Last week, parsha Vayakel. Here we go, Vayakel again. All these parshas, Sisa, Vayakel. What does he say in Zohar Vayakel? Daf Kuf Tzadik Zayin Omer Aleph, 197a. He says there, he talks about Noach. Says that you, Noach, Ishu Beisei, you and your family should go into the Teva. Noach or Beisei. Asked the Zohar, the Eibishter had no other way to protect Noach. He couldn't, let's say, send them to another place in the world where they were, or as Yisrael, where the Mabel didn't fall, according to the way the Zohar, many opinions, the Zohar brings that. So it says, no, that's not the point. The point is because anything outside is a sakana now. And you have to be sequestered in a Teva. And this, they zeichen that, I guess the Loshen, Yachbi Atzma Mistorim, is based on, L'yivra b'seif el Yachbi Atzma Mistorim is based on that Zohar. So interesting. So even though it's Pasha Vayakel, you talk about gathering, but there's a time the gathering has to be Beruchnis. Clear halacha. What does it teach us, however, in our spiritual sense of the word? This is how Pesach was born. It was born from a calamity. It was born from a catastrophe, an epidemic that night. However, you follow what God says and you stay at home. That brings redemption and geula. Now, in our case, like the Gemara says, it may not be b'boker one morning. No, it's not just for a night. It could be more than one night. But at the end, there'll be geula from this epidemic and geula b'chlal from Golus. That is a definite, just as it was ki meitzeis chameres mitzrayim. And we're going into Pesach. This is an opportunity to celebrate Pesach in a way we never did before. We all had our plans. There have been big family celebrations. Now it's a time to do it in a new creative way. Same Pesach. But you can turn Pesach into a journey, exactly what we're experiencing. Pesach now, when we say that Chayv Adam Lemer, B'chol Dever Der Chayv Adam Lemer, Liras Asatzme, Kilu Yotzim Mitzrayim. Person is responsible to see as if he left Mitzrayim. What do you need more? This plague and this epidemic, this pandemic, is a replay, not just commemorating. It's literally a replay of what happened then in a different way. And hopefully with less consequences. But the approach, how to understand, there's a time, there's like he says in Kehelas, there's a time to speak, there's a time to be quiet, there's a time to congregate, there's a time to be sequestered. This is what the Eibishter wants of us now. And Pesach and Mitzrayim, Yitzias Mitzrayim, this Seder, we can talk about it and relive it and say, what lessons do we learn from what happened 3,332 years ago for our times today? And what's the end of the story? Avodah meyinu take. And b'chol deir v'deir eimdim aleinu l'chalisenu. Every generation we have different challenges. But v'hi she'amda lanu. Amuna, our faith, the promise of God will prevail. So you have the whole Pesach story that you can tell to your children and yourself and anyone we're in contact with how to experience what we're experiencing now, both to be prudent and practical, stay at home, but also how to become a greater person and not to allow this to in any way impact us psychologically, to demoralize us. On the contrary, empowers us to rise and be even more neshamadik and more spiritual and more Yetzias Mitzrayim. And what's Mitzrayim at the end? Mitzrayim means limitations, constraints, fears, inhibitions. Every feeling people are describing today is in one word, Mitzrayim. And what's Yetzias Mitzrayim? Redeeming ourselves from that, transcending it, getting beyond it. So you have the whole story of Pesach and Mitzrayim, Mamish, perhaps in a way that was never given to us in such clear fashion. And not just as a story we reliving Pesach and doing the mitzvah. What will it do for us, for our psyches, for our souls, for our consciousness, could be tremendous. Pesach can be literally God sent, Magdim Refuah Lamaka. Well, I don't know if that's the case exactly in this case. But a refuah, begashmis and beruchnis, in the deepest possible way. And with that, I want to read to you what's settled from the Rebbe. Hapshkocha Pratis just came into my inbox. This is Pasha Shmi. The Rebbe is writing to someone who seemed to be in a bad mood. So the Rebbe writes, B'negei matzav rucha. I can show you the page. Here's the page. I don't know if you can see it on the video, but if you want a copy of it, just go to ChassidusApply.com, go to the forum where you can submit anonymous questions, and give us your email address. I'll be happy to send you this settle, and I'm going to read another settle in a minute. B'negei matzav rucha. Listen to this. Regarding matzav rucha, her mood, Hare Nissan, the month of Nissan, hu chedesh hageula, the month of redemption, mikol inyan hamafriya lecheres, but everything that's an impediment to freedom, va'avedas Hashem b'simcha, and serving God with joy. That's what Nissan is. How more apropos is such an answer for now? Second settle. Could also put it up. It's a second settle from the Rebbe, Ksavyat Kodshe. And the Rebbe writes, Kishen ischadesh rachmon litzlan cheli beguf. When a new, God forbid, illness or disease affects the body, an illness of the body, sheloi hoye b'der sha'ovar, an illness that did not exist in the previous generation, muchrochim l'refuah chadosha. It compels, we must have a new healing. Alachas Kama says the Rebbe, even more so b'cheli ha-nefesh. In acheli ha-nefesh, in the illness of the spirit. Shetzorech liyas lafosha baraisa, there needs to be lafosha. Lafosha is the chadash, to immerse ourselves with passion and learning and innovation. Lafosha, chidush in Torah, because there's a chidush in the cheli. So even if there is no new illness, a new challenge, a spiritual one, the lavochi must be that way, according to the Zeir and Nigla as well, that a person lafosha should be machadish in Torah. This is very much similar to what the Rebbe said, Yud Aleph Nisan Tov Shem and Beis, which I quoted a number of times. A new machla that was never there. We have to find people who can heal it and provide the healing. And beginning with Torah Meviyah Refuah Le'elam. So Tutzetlach, if you want a copy, again, go to ChassidusApply.com, give us your email address, I'll be happy to send it to you. Okay. So, the next question that was asked, should we be doing things differently because of the situation? So let me read the full question. Now that everything has turned upside down and everything is so different in life, is our avodah the same as before? Is our work the same as our avodah the same as before? Are we supposed to do all we were doing before just now virtually and with social distancing? Should I be teaching my class as if it's temporary and we'll be going back to school, or have a different goal? Should we be focusing on something else? Very good question. And the answer is both. Obviously, everything that we've been doing, positive things, teaching, learning, mitzvahs, everything has to be done. What do you mean? There's a Torah. The aspects that we're being told, I'll be Torah, to stay home and not go to shul, not make events. Simcha should be very minimal. And all that, that's also Torah. So there's a shift, because the Torah, according to the situation in the world, we have to now adjust to that. But everything that we don't, but learning goes on, all the shiurim, everything we have to still do, we have to now do it, and whatever, we have to adjust towards it. Fine. But then there's another side. According to the Rambam and the Rebbe's emphasis all the time, no, to just do everything as business as usual is not responding to the moment. This challenge, we have to rise and say, you know what, this challenge, we have to do new things. The virtual learning is a good replacement to some extent, but there's something more that it has. It can create more learning. It can create connection with more people. I myself have connected to more people in the last 3 weeks online than I ever have. So we have to increase. And yes, when we see something happening in the world, we have to be more introspective, more soulful, looking to find more good ways to add in love and kindness and goodness and courage and strength and so on. That's how we have to see. So disruption has to be a disruption that leads us to a shift. Pedig Tezvav in Tanya, just to make the point, drive the point home, shift doesn't mean you suddenly have to change the whole world. The Alter Rebbe in that powerful chapter says, what's Aveda? Doing something out of your comfort zone. If you, in the time of the Gemara, they learned the Gemara says Menachos. 100 times they reviewed the same piece. It sounds like a lot, but then it was the custom, it was the routine, the habit. It's not Aveda, lo yavodai. 101 time, that one time, he says, outweighs all the 100. But you can't get to the 101 without the 100, obviously. Because it's a shift, it's a hazozah. We have to have a hazozah. When you see a world that's disrupted in a negative way, we need to disrupt ourselves in a positive way. And the Rebbe says that if you learned one daf, you have to learn now 2 daf. That's what teshuva is. You double, you triple, you add. So the disruption has to be getting out of our comfort zone, out of our habits, out of our patterns, out of our routines. And that's Aveda. And that hazozah changes worlds because it's yours. It's your shift. It may not be a shift for me, but it's your shift. When we say b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafsha, b'chol ma'edecha, with all your heart, it says levavcha, nafshecha. It has to be your heart, your spirit. And then b'chol ma'edecha, with all your might, with all your all. Your ma'edecha may be different than mine. It has to be more than what you did yesterday, more than your comfort zone. If your extra is my comfort zone, it's not good enough for me, or vice versa. So ma'eidcha, and when you do your ma'id, you go out of your comfort zone, a shift, then there's alamayla, the ma'id amiti. God creates a shift from above. That's what's required today. Okay, next question. Let's talk about teshuva bringing healing, since we talked about Torah. Can you please give a brief summary of some of the mamorim that say great is teshuva, gdei teshuva, because it brings a healing to the world. Gdei teshuva shemevi refuah le'elam. So besides Torah mevi refuah le'elam, it also says it about teshuva. The Frierdiker Rebbe quotes one of these sayings in the Maimer Teshuva Yisrael Ad Havai Lekecha in Sefer Amorim Kontreisim Chelik Aleph, Volume 1, and says just like there can be physical illnesses, there can also be spiritual illnesses, etc. Exactly. So I explained in the previous weeks why Torah mevei refuah le'elam. The Rebbe explains it actually in Sichos, because Torah is stakel bar Aisa bar Alma. The Rebbe looked into Torah as a blueprint, and he created the world. So any problem in the world, where do you go? To the operator's manual. Where does a doctor go to find healing for a problem? He goes to the operator's manual, or what makes a human being tick, the medical journals and so on. We have Torah, God's operator's manual, meaning God himself, the creator. So the Torah is the obvious place to go. That when you learn it, chosh bereisha, you have a headache. Chosh beyad, chosh beragle, someone has a foot problem. You learn the Torah because every part of the body corresponds to a part of the Torah. And the Rebbe explains, tzaddikim who knew how to learn, they knew which part of the Torah corresponded. Ein nitoni yudei adma. We don't know, so we have to learn everything. But the concept is clear. Torah goes to the root of creation. So when there's a misalignment in any physical way, create a spiritual alignment, and automatically will also help in a physical way. This is not a contradiction, because the Eibishter also said, go to a doctor. It's hand in hand. Because the Eibishter wants to work through nature, through the laws that he himself created that govern the universe. coupled with the ruchni zdika. So Chassidus talks about cheli haguf and cheli hanefesh. The Rambam is based on the Rambam. So healing. What about teshuva? How does teshuva bring healing? Because teshuva has also that same element. What's the opposite of teshuva? A person, God forbid, does an avera, a chet. So chet tzadas brought death to the world. It brought disease that would ultimately bring death. Why? Because it misaligned. When you're aligned, a mitzvah is from the word connection. Avera is from the word dislocation. So when you're aligned, that's called health. When a human being is beruchnius and begashmius aligned to what God wants, Adam and Chava listening to Hashem, so the health, Atem advekim b'Hashem elokechem chaim kol chamayim, you're attached to the source of life, to the energy source, the power source, so of course that brings you health. But as soon as you misalign, and they went off on their own, they're going to eat from the tree of knowledge they were told not to eat. It's not a small matter. They're severing themselves to some extent, disconnecting, moving away, misaligning themselves from their source. So what do you think is the next step? Oh, now your body has gone off on its own. The body is no longer aligned with the neshama, so there's going to be misalignments. This is called the root of illness. Teshuva corrects that. Teshuva, what does teshuva mean? Not repentance, return. You're returning the person back to health. Every doctor will tell you, we don't heal. The body has natural immunity and has natural healing powers. We facilitate, because sometimes an infection, a disease, a virus, could attack the immune system to the point that the human being cannot access the natural healing power because it's been overwhelmed. So what doctors do, they either accentuate the process, they expedite the process, they get rid of the infection, they fight the infection, or they strengthen the immune system, all the different methods. But it's returning back, libriose, chezer libriose is the expression. You return to the ultimate optimal health. In Ruchnikas terms, when Adam and Chava and then the following generations sinned, what does it say? The Shechina slowly separated, got concealed. We learn in Basiligani, Shira Shirim Rabba. It was below. And with every sin, it got disconnected. What did Avram Avinu do? He began to reverse the process. He brought healing to the world. He returned the Shechina to Rekiah Shishi, then Rekiah Chamishi, until Moshe Deir Hashvi, 7th generation, brought it back down to earth and realigned it. And that's why it says by Matan Teira, Poska Zumasa. The toxins, that's the word, Zuma, poison, Sam. The toxins that entered at Chet Tzadas, Poska, it ceased. Healing. Everybody was healed by Matan Teira, including Moshe, his speech issue. But then the Chet Egel reintroduced the toxins. And ever since, we've been trying to repair. So every disease and every illness is rooted in this approach, and until it comes physical, because the physical evolves from the spiritual. So when we can go back to the root and heal at the root, it helps. But the Eibishter still said, I want you to heal it on every possible way. That's why you go to a doctor and you take the right medicines, or you have to watch yourself in one way or another, eat the right things, drink properly, and so on. It's not a contradiction. So that's why teshuva may be the full elam, because teshuva brings healing back. It's not a zgula or a magic pill, because teshuva realigns the world. It returns it to its natural place, exactly what health means. Realigning body and soul, the flow. Every illness, every disease is some impediment. A blockage, God forbid, in an artery, a disease, an infection that doesn't allow the body to fully function properly. Health is about seamlessness, the seamless unity between body and soul, that the entire body is aligned with the soul's energy. That means every part of the body is aligned. Sefer Cheredim, a sefer that explains how every mitzvah, the mitzvahs, how each mitzvah corresponds to which limb or organ in the body. So Ramach Evorim, Ramach Shasagidim correspond to the 248 limbs, to the 248 positive mitzvahs. And 365 negative mitzvahs correspond to the Shasagidim, the sinews, the veins, the nerves, however you translate Gidim in the body. And that's La'ovda L'Shamra. Adam and Chava were told La'ovda, to serve, that's the 248 positive. L'Shamra, to protect and avoid and refrain from the 365 negative. That's a healthy, aligned being. That will be when Moshiach comes. That was the way it was before Chet Tzadas, and the rest is history. And we are now in the process of trying to heal of another misalignment. Okay, next question. So suggestions to annul the decree. It says teshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah can annul bad decrees. Yes, we say that there are Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Nissan, and Tekef. Teshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah is ma'virnas agzeda, mavatlimis agzeda, the different lashenis. So teshuva I just explained. Tefillah is another form, of course, mispal. We bind ourselves with Hashem, and tzedakah, tatzil memovis. Charity saves from death, because the Medrash says why? Because when you give somebody money who needs it, an ani chashiv kemes, an ani, a pauper, is like compared to a dead person. They're emotionally dead, they're financially destitute. So when you reinvigorate somebody, whether it's with financially or another way, God reinvigorates you. So every mitzvah has that zgula. Teshuva and Torah particularly, and Torah, Tefillah, Teshuva and Tefillah and tzedakah. So for sure those things, and we talked about it last week from the Tzemach Tzedek's letters to the communities, what to be done. He included tzedakah, and of course Tefillah, and Torah, and other things that we discussed then. Can you please make some suggestions that we individually and as a community can do to stop the coronavirus? Thank you. So we've mentioned some of them. I also mentioned the Zgula that the Alter Rebbe we bring from Keteiros, learning Parshas Keteiros. So I want to give a little more information on that because a few of you asked me about that. The Alter Rebbe is not the first. Remember, Keteiros begins to destroy the Mageifa, the epidemic in the Parshas Kerach. That's where it originates from. But there's a Zohar. We spoke about the Zohar, Daf Kuf Aleph. I believe it was in Daf Kuf Aleph, in which Zohar Achrei or Vayakel, I'm not positive, I have to look it up. I discussed it last week, the Tzemach Tzedek brings it in the letter. But I also now looked a little deeper into it, and I see from the Arizal, there's a whole, actually, I'll tell you where right away. The Zohar Daf Kuf Aleph is in Vayero, Bereshis, I'm sorry. There's a Migdash Melech on the Zohar, and he brings from the Ramaz, Ramoshe Zakuto, he says, Zelasheni, Nira, because there's a whole story from Bnei Kfar Tarsha. They were Chachomim, and how they made a whole method to get rid of an epidemic through people separating in the city, spreading themselves out, and learning Keteiros. So he discusses at length. So he says from the Sefer HaKavonos, from the Arizal, it says, "Hamagefa bo k'sheyesh pselis b'techa birurim." A magefa, an epidemic, comes when there's waste, toxins, inside the birurim. Because remember, birurim is due to after the Chet Tzadas, everything got mixed together, like a snowball effect of good and bad, and negative. What's a birur? You separate. You separate. It's like separating the waste from the nutrients. And the waste you expel, and the nutrients you process and you absorb. The same thing as the chaff from the wheat, and so on. So the same thing by wine. The fermentation of wine is also through that, getting rid of the dregs and retaining the wine. So there's always a process of birurim, separation. But in birurim you can have waste that's mixed into it. It says a magefa comes from that waste. Sheyesh pselis b'techa birurim shaloi huvraru v'hi hamoves hamemis l'odem b'magefa. So it wasn't refined yet, so there's still toxins. When there's toxins, they have the potential, God forbid, to kill. And he goes on to explain it. This is in Ramaz, Mikdash Melech, Ramaz, in Daf Kuf Aleph, Omid Aleph, Medrash Hanelim, 101a, in Zohar. So now, I looked it up in the Arizal. The Arizal is fascinating. I'll say the word fascinating in this time. In Shara Kavonis, Drushay Tfilis HaShachar, Drush Gimel, the third section, he talks at length here of zgulas that he gave to the Chaim Vital, received from the Arizal when the time of Magefa. And he talks about Keteiros, because that's what Keteiros do. The 11 Samamaniak Keteiros, the 11 spices. What's the 11? Is the Klippah. 10 is a perfect, healthy situation. The 11th is an extra makiv that could be in the negative. And the Keteiros is a tikkun to get rid of that extra toxin. And he discusses this at length. And he says, I heard from my teacher, Lezman HaMagefa. He says, Kol HaNeshama Shel Bnei Adam, all the souls of human beings, He Mimashem Izbarer Min Zayin Malkei Adam Demesu. All the souls came from what refinement, from the separation from the 7 kings that died, which is Toyu. We learn about the 7 kings in the end of Parsha Vayishlach. There's the progeny of Esau. It's referring Vayimloch Vayamos. That death of Shviras HaKelim, the shattering of containers, is a spiritual form of death. All neshamas come from there. He says that's why it says Kol Yisrael Bnei Melachim Hem. We're the children of the Melachim. Which Melachim? Those Melachim. Because we live in a world that's filled with toxins. So we come from the fallout of those, the wreckage, you can say, the shattering of the containers in Toyu. That's the Lashon that Ramaz quotes. And when within these refinements and these separations, when you separate, you don't always get rid of all the toxins. There's still some pselas that were not refined. Zeh pselas nase oras v'sam hamovas. This waste becomes toxic, and sam hamovas, poisonous, the poison, the poisonous death, killing poison. Hamemis la'odam bezman hamagefa, that can kill a person during an epidemic. For who soid haposuk yidbek Hashem b'cha es hadever. That's the posuk yidbek Hashem b'cha es hadever. Dever is an epidemic. Listen to this now. I'm going to read this and I'll translate it. Va'inyan hu, what's the inyan of this? Ke'esam ha'klipas sheyesh be'esam ha'birurim kenisker. Those klipas, those husks, meaning like shells. So when they're protecting the fruit, it's great. But if they get mixed with the fruit, they can become toxic. He says those klipas that are now in the birurim, like we mentioned, heim hamakim v'nekfim la'odem b'zman ha'magefa. They strike and infect a person during the time of an epidemic. And after it strikes him, they get attached. I mean, it's literally like the word of a virus. They don't just attack a toxin, they get attached. They don't separate from him. And they're constantly attached to him. And they surround him in all directions. Shir kama amis. A number of amis around him. You hear? That you can't be around this person because it's also the contagious is also affecting not just his physical body, his aura, his environment. And moreover, even in that shchuna, in that neighborhood, where the person who was struck was infected by the illness, or even a vessel, a container, or a garment of his, you have to distance yourself from it. And anyone that goes and touches it or gets connected or attached to it, they become attached to these klippas, that above mentioned klippas, husks, and can be hurt. And this is the reason. By the other illnesses and makas and plagues, in Parsha Kisove, it doesn't say the word yidbak, attached itself. Like he said, the posuk, yidbak Hashem b'chos hadever. K'moy b'inin hadever v'amagefa. By dever and magefa, by an epidemic or pandemic and a plague, it does say yidbak. Lefisha b'shara cheloim, because in other illnesses, ein ha-klipa hem izdapkim sham. The klipa, the husk, doesn't get attached. It's there, but it doesn't get attached. Mashenke b'makas hadever v'amagefa. However, by the amaka, by an epidemic, by a plague or an epidemic, she mebchinas klipas habirurim aniskorim, that comes from the klipas, the husks of the birurim that got stuck, that you still have the waste in there. The pselas, heim dvukim boy, they get attached. Uba malbushav and his garments, uba shchunose and his neighborhood, uba chol kelov and all his containers. And then he goes on to explain how Keteiris is a tikkun for this. I mean, you read this is Kisvei Arizal, Shara Kavonis, from the Sheina Miriam. Drush Tfilas HaShachar, Drush Gimel. Now, when we learn something, this is not meant to frighten. When we learn, the Rebbe said a number of times, when you learn in Chassidus and Kabbalah about klippos, you actually mevada the klippos, because you're learning in Torah. Kol ha'esek b'Torah se'ela is the Torah of it, and the Torah is always a healthy part. It's like it's sucking out from the root this toxins. That's what you want to do. All antibiotics, homeopathy, is all about meneya be'aba lishda be'narga. What happens? How do you build immunity? You build immunity because the disease and the illness has attacked. Your body begins to fight. As it builds its antibodies, it becomes a stronger body and then becomes immune to that disease. If you can bottle that into a formula, that becomes an antibiotic. The disease itself destroys the disease. The wood of the tree is what cuts down the tree. And homeopathy is also based on that. You concentrate apart. You have to know the balance. You concentrate the healing, the disease in a way that you could turn it into a healing factor. So the best way to heal a disease is taking the disease and let it turn on itself. So when we learn in Torah about these things, that's what it helps us do. Okay. That's a Shara Kavonis. There's plenty more to do, plenty more to cover. Let me see, time is limited, so let me just do a few more, and there's always, these issues continue to be relevant. Okay. Let's talk about a moment about, someone wrote about Crown Heights. Dear Rabbi Jacobson Mashpia, Almin Distimin V'Leis Galin V'Almin Dis Galin. Very nice. The Crown Heights community has gotten hit hard by the Wuhan flu. Okay. Otherwise known as the coronavirus. While many other communities, including those in Israel, were hunkering down and socially distancing, our community is partying it up and passing the Kung flu around from one to another with disastrous results. What lessons should our community learn from this disaster? First of all, it's not a time to talk, not b'shvachim shel Yisrael. I read it because you wrote it, and there's some people have this thought. I don't even know, I think this is somewhat exaggerated. Yes, not everyone took it seriously. I remember Purim, we didn't really understand the gravity of it. Once we did, anyone that behaved recklessly is Achman al-Islan. But I don't know if it's Crown Heights. I hear in Borough Park and in Williamsburg and many communities in Kiryat Yel that, God forbid, including in Israel, that still are not fully taking this seriously. So let's not talk against. And even if it's the case, I'm not here to talk about the B'nai B'shlachan Shel Yisrael, especially when now we need brachas and tefillas and yeshuas for everybody. And we're not going to start pointing fingers. It's true, people got exposed, people were not careful. Hopefully everybody has learned their lesson. The lesson, what you learn is, we follow Torah, follow halacha, follow what the Torah says to listen to doctors. I just read straight from Kisvei Arizal and Kabbalah. I read from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, the Gemara and Baba Kama. There's a Torah for these things. We don't do what we want. People talk, someone writes to me about what they want to bench Birchas HaGomel. What should they do? Same thing with an aliyah. Right now the Torah says you don't have a minyan. A minyan is midar derabon, it's not midar raisa. Even if it's Yom Kippur and you're eating something that raisa sheretz minad raisa osur, it's a mitzvah to do it because b'koach nefesh. The Eibishter, same Eibishter told you to do this, told you to do that. So what is this? We run the show here. It's about our comfort zone, about what you want to do. One day you'll be able to make Birchas HaGomel, you'll make it. Maybe it'll be over Zman, you won't need to make it. The Rebbe, how many times did the Rebbe say, why don't we say Tachanun on Shabbos or Yontif? Or Chedesh Nissan? Because Tachanun is a negative. But you can't be depriving anyone from what Tachanun accomplishes. The Rebbe says, it means Shabbos, Yontif, Nissan, other times, accomplishes what Tachanun would accomplish. We are now accomplishing everything through what the Eibishter says we should do, which is to be quarantined and follow halachas and follow what the doctors say. So I'm not going to go justify, I'm not going to explain. The lesson learned is, be a Torah. Don't do what you want, do what the Torah says, even if you don't like it. Simple as that. That's the first lesson. The second lesson, now that we're in this situation, the Rebbe would always say, if someone made a mistake, now you have to double and triple. The Rebbe would tell people, someone said one time they didn't eat kosher, now make sure you eat more kosher than you've ever, meaning be more careful than ever, and be mashpia on others who don't eat kosher to start eating kosher. That's what we have to be. If there was any situation or community was less careful, now we have to be double, triple careful, and do even more avos Yisrael, and caring for people, and helping people, and doing everything possible, like I said, to rise to the occasion. That's what we do. We learn from it, even if there was a mistake. Someone asked me the question about Tevlim Kalim. I'll mention it. I'm not a Pesach. But being that mikvahs are closed due to the coronavirus, under these exigent circumstances, are we permitted to use the new kalim we bought for Pesach without tavling them first? So I asked a Rav, and he told me very straightforward. Within 20-minute walk, you can find the water, an ocean, and you can tavel there, even if the mikvah is closed. So there's a simple workaround for that. I want to conclude with a letter. Well, there's more to say. Let me just see what else I want to address. You know what? Before I get to the letter, I want to just... does it say somewhere in Torah that when a plague breaks out, we should blow the shofar? Perhaps as a reminder to do teshuva. I've not seen that. It may be. We speak Chassidus. There's definitely the call, a wake-up call. Lav dafka with actually blowing shofar. A wake-up call. That's the whole point of what Uri Yishen Mitir Damaschem, to wake us up to our reality, and that's what we have to do. So that answers that. Okay, so there's a few comments that came in that were not direct questions, and I felt I should read it. Someone asked the question, is it appropriate... Where is it? Is it inappropriate to share funny corona memes on social media? Of course, these are not being shared to make fun of those who are suffering, but rather to help make everyone stuck at home laugh and cheer up. Look, I think it's case by case. I think in general you have to be extremely sensitive because there are people suffering, families who have family members suffering. But having a little humor from here and there that's not off color and that's not inappropriate and insensitive, I mean, this is divided shus, you have to make a decision like any joke. But I'd be especially careful. I've seen some things that are inappropriate, and also if the wrong person sees it, it's very offensive. So I think we need to be careful, extra careful. But at the same time, there's nothing wrong to having a certain light attitude, but never chaz v'shalom in a way that lowers our guard and doesn't follow Torah and halacha. To strengthen us. Like Amidst the B'dichas, when I said, Rabbi said Amidst the B'dichas, a joke in the beginning of his teaching was to open their hearts so they should understand and learn better. So that has to be the intention, not a joke, a frivolous joke for the name, just to get a laugh. To be with some deeper purpose, and teichen would be my answer to that. Okay. There have been debates in the community if the community should have a fast day as part of the communal teshuva for God to stop the plague. In this I defer to Rabbanim. You have to go to your Rav, the Rav of the community, the Rav that you trust, and ask that question. On one hand, the Dos saying for him that they actually eliminated fast days when there was a mageifa because it could weaken the person. Some people say a little fast, if you could, can help. Is it a tikkun? This is case by case, and I would follow Rabbanim. I'm not going to go intervene into halachic matter like that. There is an argument to be made each way. Most will be machmir, which means better not to fast, because what do you need to put yourself in any given chance when there's even a sophic risk? You don't know what you have, what you don't have, and fasting can not always be healthy to do, especially in a time of a mageifa. But this should be addressed to a halachic expert, Tarov. Okay, how do we see the light? How can we become confident and happy when the virus is spreading? His virus spreading is only getting worse. So to speak, how do we see the light in this what seems deep and bitter darkness? Thank you. Another person wrote, seeing good in the negative. Chav Zayin Oder, which was last week. It can't be a mere coincidence that exactly 2 years later, on the same day, the Rebbe had another stroke. The Rebbe had a stroke, Chav Zayin Oder Nun Beis, 1992, and then 1994, a second stroke on the same day. This is definitely a bad luck day, but Rabbi Jacobson, is it not true that everything bad in the world has an equal or better counterpart of good? Hopefully God also has good things planned for this day. As we are taught in Messianic times, Tisha B'Av will be a celebratory day. Can we also say this about the coronavirus, that ultimately something good will come out of it? Thank you. I really enjoy listening to your weekly share. It really helps me focus on what's truly important. So there's no question. I just was hearing a clip from the Rebbe of Fabrengen. He says, if something happens in the world, it's impossible that it should be just bad. From God's mouth above can never come out evil. So everything has to lead to something positive. Even for the moment, it's a concealment or even something negative, It has to lead. So that's not even a question. We still fight and argue with God that we shouldn't even have that moment, that we have to be quarantined, or that moment of concern. But everything is going to lead to the good, not even a question. Even Chav Zayin Oder. It may not be there yet. The spiral staircase of the Baal Shem Tov. You turn, and to reach to the top, you have to turn your back, and you may think you're not even near the destination when you're right there and your back is turned at the pinnacle. So there's no question. You learn Chassidus, you learn how to see light and dark. First of all, you realize everything is for a better purpose. Second of all, even if we don't understand it, we rise to the occasion to become better people, as I mentioned. You can control your attitude. And we don't know what God's plan is. And finally, we learn that within every negative, there's always a positive dimension. There are lessons to be learned from a virus that can be positive lessons. There's lessons to be learned from quarantining that can be positive, even though there's a negative element. This is ultimately what we do. We transform. That's how we transform. Mishabche. So you may not be completely transformed, but that's the attitude. The more you learn Chassidus, the more you learn methods how to do that, how to look at it that way, and how to actually transform a negative. At the end of the day, you can take a virus, a terrible virus, and if you're able to turn it into antibodies, it can become a healer that will eliminate that virus forever. Smallpox, polio, and others have been destroyed completely by doing exactly that. But there's early stages that sometimes you don't yet see the cure in that state. But the Magdim Refuah Lamaka, the Eibishter did not create anything that does not have a healing element. Everything can be healed and will heal. Just a matter of time and a matter of what work we need to do to get there. Okay. So there were many comments that came in. Let me just see if I've covered everything I wanted to cover. Yeah. People are asking a lot about Moshiach. I want to reserve that. Maybe I'll discuss that next week. And the connection. I just want to say this. To go look for the Muslim for everything is Moshiach. There's the Muslim for everything. When the economy is good, it's a siman of Matanim Mitzuyim Ka'ofar. Pleasures, delights will be all over. When the economy is bad, sudden kiss, there's Gemaras that talk about that being a sign of Moshiach. When things are good, there's a sign. When things are not so good, when there's a war, it's a sign. When there's no war, there's a sign. To start looking for Midrashim and fill every siman a sign that ever happened is not our way of doing things. The things that Rebbe said about, let's say, during Melech Poras, the Gulf War, direct things that Rebbe said, Hoy Yitaka B'Shefer, Hoy B'Yemehu Yitaka B'Shefer Godel, in Tov Chav Zayin, 67, 68, after the 6-day war. That's the Rebbe. We have to be careful not to do that. At the same time, we're absolutely sure nothing has changed. Mashiach is coming. And our challenge now is not whether we see the virus as a sign. Will we rise to the occasion and use the situation to do everything possible to bring the Geula? That's the way we should look at it. And we'll talk about this some more. Let me just conclude with two notes, which one is extremely inspiring. The other one I found it brought a smile to my face. So why not share that? Dear Rabbi Jacobson, please take this humorously because it's not meant seriously. I'm a local apicatist that enjoys listening to your Sunday night broadcast. You have really stepped it up during this crisis. I just want to say thank you. From knacken Semitschke, as the Friedrich Rebbe said, wird man nicht kein apicatist. From cracking sunflower seeds, you don't become an apicatist. Meaning you have to earn that title. But I get the humor. The local apicatist, thank you. I don't know who you are, so we'll keep it at that. And let me read now this note. This actually is a note that came from the first place winner of last year's contest. We've not forgotten the contest. It's just circumstances now, of course, are putting things in priority, and we'll talk about them. So anyone who's written, all your essays, they're saved. They haven't gone anywhere. They've not been quarantined. And we will look at them, and you'll hear more about it in the near future. So the winner of last year wrote these words. Dear Rabbi Jacobson, thank you so very much for the inspiring content you are putting out through this time. I wrote something this morning and want to share it with you. This morning as I awoke, I took in the fact that it has been 5 years to the day since my divorce. I also took in the fact that not only did I survive past that difficult time of my life, I have thrived. I thanked God for giving me another new day, washed my hands, fed the cats, opened the windows, and let the sunshine in. I stepped outside with my coffee to drink it in the garden. The streets are silent, and the song of birdsong fills the bright blue sky. A robin flies from tree to tree. A squirrel runs along the phone line. A neighbor's dog barks, but the streets are quiet except for a siren. People are staying home. A pair of cardinals and a woodpecker are frequenting the bird feeder. A friend suggested I leave milk for a fluffy stray gray cat, and she found it. I love the marvelous wild. I think right now people are chewing their food more slowly. There is nowhere to rush to right now. People are resting more. Children are reading more books and hearing more bedtime stories. Mothers are mothering, fathers are fathering, and there's more cuddling. Prayers are being said from hearts at home rather than places of worship. People are meditating on the essence of their lives. All creative talents are being amplified. Cooks are cooking, painters are painting, writers are writing, musicians are making music, gardeners are in their gardens. Stores are closed, but nature is open. The tulips, daffodils, and hyacinths, hope I pronounced that right, are emerging from their winter slumber. People are walking their dogs and feeding the birds. People are connecting with neighbors from their homes, singing from balconies in Italy, and playing piano and sax from balconies in Barcelona. Cherry, peach, and plum trees are about to burst into blooms. The trees are about to leaf out in spring green. Sunrise and sunset will seem more vibrant than ever to those who are home with more time to notice them. We will reprioritize. Our collective thoughts will elevate. We will connect on a soul level as a global village, seeing the impact we all really have on one another. This time will pass and we will emerge more mindful and more grateful. We will become the guardians of this ball of beauty the way we are meant to be. We will heal, we will grow, we will produce nourishing food in our own backyards, we will reconnect with one another and with this beautiful garden we inhabit that is our mutual home. If this sounds overly optimistic, just plant a few seeds. As Audrey Hepburn said, to plant a garden is to believe in tomorrow. Ayelet. I thank you for that. I read it. Very touching and empowering. And with that, I want to conclude this special edition of MyLife Chassidus Applied, episode 302. It should be truly a Chedesh Nissan of Nissim, of miracles upon miracles. Healing to everyone, a full refuah, shleimah, v'kreva to everyone that needs healing. The least amount of aggravation. The rest of us should be protected, be well. Follow the laws of God, both in nature and beyond, through the words of the doctors and our health professionals and our rabbonim, and keep your head up. This is a unique time. Our extraordinary vulnerability can allow us to achieve things we never could have achieved. This is the time to rise to the occasion. This is Simon Jacobson. We're here every Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m. MyLife Chassidus Applied. Call Tuv everybody. It should be a Chedesh HaGeula immediately, even before the next few days, so we can march into Pesach, to march into Yud Aleph Nissan, to Yud Gimel Nissan, to Pesach, the Gula, Amidst, shleimah.
This program is brought to you by MyLife, Chassidus Applied. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at chassidusapply.com/donate.